I stood alone at my husband's funeral, watching my stepson Tyler shake hands like he was hosting a business meeting, not saying goodbye to his father. 30 years of marriage, and Harold's son couldn't even look me in the eye. I thought grief was the worst pain I'd ever feel until Tyler cornered me at the reception with a smirk on his face and legal papers in his hand. The house is mine now. You have 2 hours to pack your personal items, he said, security guards already waiting. Dad always felt sorry for you. That's the only reason he kept you around. 30 years I spent loving Harold, nursing him through his heart condition, building a home while Tyler drained his father's bank accounts. I gave up my pottery career to be Harold's wife, to try to be a mother to Tyler, who only saw me as competition. Now, on the day I buried my husband, I was homeless, kicked out like garbage while still wearing my funeral clothes. What Tyler didn't know. Harold had seen through his son's manipulation. And 2 days later, I'd discover exactly what my husband had planned for us both. I heard the minister's voice like a distant echo as I stood beside Harold's casket. The words washed over me without meaning, my grief a wave so vast I was drowning in it. Harold, my partner, my love, my anchor for 30 years, was gone. The church pews were filled with mourners dressed in black, but I felt utterly alone. My father was a great man. Tyler's voice cut through my haze as he took the podium. My stepson, Harold's only child, stood tall in his expensive suit, voice unwavering as he addressed the crowd. He built a legacy that will endure through his business and through me. Not once did he mention me. Not once in his 15-minute speech did Tyler acknowledge that Harold had shared his life with me for 3 decades. To listen to him, you would think Harold had lived as a widower since Tyler's mother died, raising his sons single-handedly while building his publishing company from nothing. I caught the sympathetic glance from Marta, my oldest friend, sitting 3 rows back. She knew. She had witnessed the tension between Tyler and me from the beginning, had seen how he rejected every olive branch I offered over the years. As people filed past to offer condolences, Tyler positioned himself as the chief mourner, accepting hugs and handshakes like a politician. I stood slightly apart, shaking hands mechanically, murmuring thanks to people whose names I couldn't recall through the fog of grief. Eleanor, Benjamin, Harold's attorney and friend for 40 years, clasped my hand between both of his. I'm so deeply sorry. Harold loved you very much. His eyes held mine meaningfully, but before he could say more, Tyler appeared at his elbow. Benjamin, the investors from Chicago are here, he said, deliberately turning his back to me. They've come all this way. The reception at our home, the beautiful Victorian that Harold and I had restored together over decades, felt surreal. I moved through rooms filled with flowers and platters of untouched food, accepting condolences and feeling like a ghost in my own house. In the dining room, someone had displayed photos of Harold through the years. I stopped short, noticing that the few pictures including me had been removed. All that remained were images of Harold with Tyler, Harold at work, Harold with his first wife. I was being erased. Mrs. Winters. Tyler's voice was cold behind me. I turned to find him standing with his wife, Jessica, both wearing identical expressions of barely concealed impatience. We need to speak with you privately. I followed them upstairs to the master bedroom, mine and Harold's room, where the bed was still unmade from the morning paramedics had taken him away. My hastily discarded nightgown still lay on the floor where I'd stepped out of it, rushing to follow the ambulance. This won't take long, Tyler said, closing the door. He withdrew an envelope from his suit jacket. These are the property documents for the house. As you can see, it's now in my name. My hands shook as I took the papers. That's not possible. Harold and I own this house together. No, Tyler's mouth curved into what might have been a smile on anyone else. Dad transferred the deed to me last year. This was always meant to be my inheritance. Jessica stepped forward, arms folded across her chest. We've arranged for security to assist you while you pack your personal items. Security? The room seemed to tilt. What are you talking about? You have 2 hours, Tyler continued as if I hadn't spoken. Take your clothes and toiletries. The furniture stays. This is my home, I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. I helped restore every inch of it. My studio is in the back garden. Dad's house, Tyler corrected. And Dad's workshop that you've been using. You've had 30 years living off my father's generosity. That ends today. Two men in uniform appeared in the doorway, private security, not police. One held out a few flattened cardboard boxes. This is insane, I said, backing away. Harold would never, but he did, Tyler interrupted. Check the paperwork if you don't believe me or call your lawyer. Either way, you need to be out by 5. I stood frozen, staring at my stepson, the boy I had tried to mother when he was 13, the teenager I had driven to college visits and helped with applications, the young man whose wedding I had helped plan despite his constant reminders that I wasn't his real mother. Why? I managed to ask. Because you were never supposed to be permanent, he said simply. Dad felt sorry for you after your first husband died. You were supposed to be a phase, but he was too kind to end it. Now I'm doing what he couldn't. I packed in a daze, the security guards watching from the doorway as I filled boxes with clothes, jewelry, and photographs. When I tried to take a small bronze sculpture Harold had given me for our 25th anniversary, one of the guards stopped me. Mr. Winters said personal items only, no valuables. By 4:30, my car was packed with what remained of my life with Harold. 30 years reduced to 3 boxes and a suitcase. As I took a final look around our bedroom, Jessica appeared in the doorway. Don't forget this is being done legally, she said, her voice softer than Tyler's but no less firm. We could contest anything you might have taken that doesn't belong to you. I walked downstairs to find mourners still mingling in the living room, oblivious to what was happening. Tyler was chatting with Harold's business partners as if he hadn't just made his stepmother homeless on the day of her husband's funeral. No one noticed as I slipped out the front door. No one except Marta, who caught my eye from across the room, her expression changing to alarm as she saw the keys in my hand. I shook my head slightly, unable to explain, and walked out into the cold April afternoon. The motel off Highway 16 was clean but depressing, its beige walls and generic prints a stark contrast to the home I'd lost. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my funeral clothes, too numb to even cry. My phone buzzed with texts from Marta, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. How had I not known? How had Harold transferred our home without my knowledge or consent? It seemed impossible, yet the papers Tyler showed me appeared legitimate. When the phone rang again, I almost didn't answer, but the caller ID showed Benjamin's number. Eleanor, he said when I picked up, his voice urgent. Where are you? I've been looking for you everywhere. Tyler kicked me out, I said flatly. Apparently Harold left him the house. There was a long pause. That's not the full story, Benjamin finally said. I need to see you right away. It's about Harold's will, his real will. Can you meet me at my office tomorrow morning? His real will? My heart thumped painfully in my chest. Not over the phone, Benjamin said quickly. But Eleanor, Harold made provisions for you. Significant ones. Tyler doesn't know everything, and that's exactly how Harold wanted it. I barely slept that night, tossing on the lumpy motel mattress until dawn broke through the thin curtains. Benjamin's words played on repeat in my mind. Harold had made provisions for me. What did that mean? And why hadn't I known about them? When my alarm finally buzzed at 7, I dragged myself to the bathroom, wincing at my reflection. Puffy eyes, pale skin, hair uncombed. I looked every bit the homeless widow I had become. I called Marta while I dressed. Eleanor, thank God, she answered on the first ring. What happened yesterday? I saw you leaving with keys in your hand. Tyler kicked me out, I said, the words still feeling unreal. He claims Harold transferred the house to him last year. That's impossible, Marta gasped. Harold would never do that to you. That's what I thought, but Tyler had documents. My voice cracked. I'm at the Mountain View Motel off Highway 16. I'm coming to get you right now, Marta insisted. You'll stay with me until this is sorted out. I can't, not yet, I told her. I'm meeting Benjamin at 9, Harold's attorney. He says there's more to the story. After promising to call Marta the moment I knew anything, I gathered my purse and headed for my car. The funeral dress was the only clean outfit I had, so I wore it again, feeling like I was still trapped in yesterday's nightmare. Benjamin's office was in downtown Millfield, a handsome brick building where Harold and I had signed wills together a decade ago. The receptionist recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Winters, Mr. Cohen is expecting you. Please go right in." Benjamin stood when I entered, his face grave. "Eleanor, I'm so sorry about yesterday. If I'd known what Tyler was planning, I would have intervened." "You couldn't have known," I said, sinking into the leather chair across from his desk. "I didn't know myself." "Tyler moved very quickly," Benjamin said, sitting back down. "Too quickly, in fact. He's made a critical error." Benjamin reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a thick manila envelope sealed with red wax. Harold's initials were pressed into the seal. "Harold left this with me 6 months ago, with explicit instructions not to open it until after his funeral." Benjamin pushed it across the desk. "He was very specific that you were to open it privately, but that I should explain the basic situation first." I stared at the envelope, afraid to touch it. "And what is the situation exactly?" Benjamin removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Harold knew Tyler better than you might think. He was aware of his son's financial difficulties and his character flaws." "You mean his selfishness, his cruelty?" The words burst out before I could stop them. "Among other things," Benjamin said carefully. "Harold loved his son, but he was not blind to his faults. The house transfer was part of a larger strategy." "Strategy?" I repeated. "Harold suffered his first heart attack 3 years ago," Benjamin explained. "After that, he began making arrangements for the future. He knew his time might be limited." "I was with him through all of that," I said, confused. "We talked about everything." "Not quite everything," Benjamin said gently. "Harold wanted to protect you even from knowledge that might worry you. He transferred the house to Tyler because he knew his son would fight for it regardless of what a will stated. It was easier to let him have it." "So I am homeless," I said, my voice flat. Benjamin smiled slightly. "You are not. That envelope contains the deed to your vacation property in Maine, transferred solely to your name 2 years ago. It also contains account information for a trust fund in your name and documentation of several other assets Harold wanted you to have." My hands shook as I finally reached for the envelope. "How much?" "Enough that you need never worry about money again," Benjamin said. "Enough to pursue your pottery without financial constraints." "Harold was very clear that he wanted you to return to your art." "And Tyler doesn't know about any of this?" Benjamin's expression hardened slightly. "Tyler believes he has one. Harold thought it best to let him believe that, at least temporarily." I broke the wax seal and opened the envelope. Inside were property deeds, bank statements, insurance policies, and a smaller envelope with my name written in Harold's familiar handwriting. "He left you his entire rare book collection as well," Benjamin added. "Those first editions are worth considerable money, though I suspect their sentimental value to you is greater." "The books," I whispered, thinking of the library we had built together, the countless evenings spent reading side by side. "Tyler will never part with those." "They're not in the house," Benjamin said. "Harold moved them to a climate-controlled storage unit last year. He told Tyler they were being professionally restored." I opened the bank statements with trembling hands. The trust fund held over $2 million. The main property, our beloved summer cottage on the coast, was now solely in my name. There were investment accounts, insurance payouts, even Harold's vintage car collection. "Why didn't he tell me?" I asked, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. "Read his letter," Benjamin suggested gently. "I'll give you privacy." He stepped out of the office, closing the door behind him. I opened the smaller envelope and unfolded the pages inside. Harold's handwriting, once strong and confident, had grown shakier in recent years, but I would have recognized it anywhere. "My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, then I have left you alone, and for that I am deeply sorry. I had hoped for many more years together, but my heart had other plans. By now, you've likely discovered Tyler's true nature in the cruelest possible way. I've tried for years to guide him toward becoming a better man, but I fear my efforts and your kindness have been wasted on him. His resentment of you has only grown deeper with time, and I knew that upon my death, he would try to take everything from you. I couldn't bear the thought of you fighting legal battles while grieving, so I made this plan. Yes, I gave Tyler the house. It was the one thing he fixated on, perhaps because it represents the family he believes you took from him. Let him have it. The physical structure is not what made it our home. You did that with your warmth and love. What Tyler doesn't know is that I've secured your future in ways he cannot touch or contest. The trust is ironclad. The property's transferred years ago with the best legal protections money can buy. Most importantly, I've left you the freedom to return to the art that brought you such joy before you met me. I've always felt guilty that you set aside your pottery to support my career and care for my difficult son. Now you can create again without constraints. In the cottage in Maine, beneath the floorboards in the main bedroom, you'll find my journals. I've kept them for years, documenting everything, my love for you, my struggles with Tyler, my hopes and fears. They may help you understand why I made these arrangements in secret. I'm sorry for not sharing this burden with you while I lived. I love you more than words can express. You made my life rich and beautiful, Elena. Now it's your turn to live the life you've always deserved. All my love, always, Harold. I pressed the letter to my chest, sobbing openly now. After everything, Harold had protected me in the only way he knew how. When Benjamin returned, I had composed myself somewhat, though my eyes were still swollen from crying. I need to go to Maine, I told him. Today, if possible. Of course, Benjamin said. I've prepared a letter informing Tyler of certain provisions of the estate. I'll deliver it after you're safely away. He'll be furious, I said, surprisingly untroubled by the thought. Yes, Benjamin agreed with a slight smile. He certainly will. 3 hours later, I was on the road north, the trunk of my car filled with my meager possessions. The pain of Harold's loss was still raw, but alongside it was something unexpected, a flicker of anticipation. The Maine cottage had always been our sanctuary, the one place where Tyler rarely visited. Now it was mine alone, holding secrets and possibilities I was only beginning to understand. As I crossed the state line, my phone buzzed with a text from Benjamin. Letter delivered. Proceed as planned. He can't touch you or what's yours. For the first time since Harold's death, I felt something close to peace. My husband had given me one final, precious gift, a future free from Tyler's cruelty and the means to reinvent myself at 65. The road stretched before me, leading to the rocky Maine coastline and the small cottage that now represented not just memories, but possibility. The Maine cottage looked exactly as I remembered it, weathered gray shingles, blue shutters, and a wide porch facing the ocean. As I pulled into the gravel driveway, exhausted from the 6-hour drive, I felt a curious mixture of grief and homecoming. This place had always been our refuge, the one spot where Harold and I could truly be alone together. I let myself in with the key I'd kept on my ring all these years, half expecting to find Harold in his favorite armchair by the window, reading glasses perched on his nose. Instead, I was greeted by silence and the faint scent of sea air and old books. After bringing in my few belongings, I went straight to the main bedroom. The patchwork quilt we'd bought at a local craft fair still covered the bed. Harold's reading lamp still stood on his nightstand. I dropped to my knees beside the bed and ran my fingers along the edge of the wide pine floorboards until I found one that moved slightly under pressure. Using a letter opener from the desk, I pried up the board, revealing a space underneath. There, wrapped in waterproof canvas, was a stack of leather-bound journals, 12 in all, dating back to before we met. I lifted them out reverently and placed them on the bed. The earliest journal began shortly after his first wife's death. I hesitated, feeling like an intruder in his private thoughts, but Harold had wanted me to read them. I opened to a random page from 15 years ago. Tyler came by the office today demanding more money. Another investment opportunity he claims can't miss. When I suggested he use his regular salary, he became angry, accusing me of never supporting his ambitions. I gave in, as I always do. Elena noticed the withdrawal but didn't question it. I hate lying to her, even by omission. She deserves better than to be caught between my guilt and my son's manipulation. I closed the journal, my heart aching. Had Harold been covering for Tyler all these years? I'd known there was tension between them, but Harold always insisted it was normal father-son friction. What else had he hidden to protect me, or perhaps to protect himself from confronting Tyler's true nature? My phone rang, startling me. Benjamin's name flashed on the screen. "Alina, are you settled in?" he asked when I answered. "Just arrived," I told him. "I found Harold's journals." "Good, there's something else you should know. Tyler's attorney contacted me this afternoon. They're challenging the trust." My stomach dropped. "Can they do that?" "They can try," Benjamin said, his voice calm. But Harold was very thorough. The trust was established years ago with regular contributions and documentation of your joint intent. It's virtually bulletproof. "What about the main property? The books?" "All transferred to you directly, with gift tax paid well outside the contestable period. Tyler's on shaky legal ground, and I think he knows it." This is likely just his initial reaction. After promising to keep me updated, Benjamin hung up. I sat on the edge of the bed, surrounded by Harold's journals, feeling strangely remote from the legal threat. Tyler had already taken our home and tarnished the funeral. What more could he possibly do? Over the next few days, I lost myself in Harold's journals, reading chronologically through his private thoughts. The early entries were primarily about grief for his first wife and concern for teenage Tyler. Then I appeared in the narrative, the quiet Potter he met at a gallery opening, the woman who made him laugh for the first time in years. His account of our courtship was so tender it brought fresh tears to my eyes. Harold described falling in love with me, his guilt about moving on after his first wife, and his hopes that Tyler would eventually accept me. Those hopes, I read with a sinking heart, were never truly realized. As the years progressed in Harold's journals, a troubling pattern emerged regarding Tyler. Small financial loans that were never repaid. Angry outbursts when Harold suggested financial independence. Manipulation using memories of his mother. And most disturbing, Harold's growing suspicion that Tyler was misusing company funds. In an entry dated just 2 years ago, Harold wrote, "I've asked Benjamin to quietly audit the company accounts. I can no longer ignore the discrepancies. If Tyler has been embezzling, I'll have no choice but to remove him from the business. The thought breaks my heart, but I cannot allow him to destroy what I've built, what will someday support Alina when I'm gone." I had just closed the journal when my phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Winters?" A woman's voice said. "It's Jessica, Tyler's wife." I stiffened. "Jessica, what can I do for you?" "I'm calling without Tyler's knowledge," she said, her voice low as if she was afraid of being overheard. "Things are bad, Alina, really bad." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, not entirely sincerely. "He's been gambling," Jessica continued. "For years. It started with poker nights, then sports betting, then online. He's lost everything we had, and now with the company accounts frozen." "Frozen?" I interrupted. "What do you mean? You don't know?" Jessica sounded surprised. "Benjamin Cohen got a court order freezing the company assets pending an investigation into financial irregularities. Tyler's been locked out of the accounts for 3 days. He's frantic." My mind raced to Harold's journal entry about the audit. Benjamin must have continued the investigation after Harold's death. "I'm sorry, Jessica," I said carefully, "but I don't see how I can help." "He's desperate," she whispered. "I'm afraid of what he might do. If you could just talk to Benjamin, ask him to lift the freeze temporarily." "That's not my decision," I told her. "And frankly, if there are financial irregularities, they should be investigated. Harold worked his entire life to build that company." "You don't understand," Jessica pressed. "There are people Tyler owes money to, dangerous people. They've already come to the house once." Despite everything, I felt a flicker of concern. "Are you and the children safe?" There was a pause. "For now, but Tyler's not thinking clearly. He keeps saying if he could just access what's rightfully his." After I hung up, I sat for a long time staring at the stack of journals. Tyler had been embezzling from his father's company to pay gambling debts. Now, with Harold gone and Benjamin investigating, he was cut off. No wonder he'd been so quick to seize the house. He needed assets, any assets, to appease his creditors. The phone rang again that evening. This time it was Benjamin with news that made my blood run cold. "The police just called me," he said without preamble. "Someone broke into the storage facility where Harold's book collection is kept. The security camera footage shows Tyler trying to access the unit." "Did he get in?" I asked, thinking of the irreplaceable first editions Harold had lovingly collected. No, the facility has excellent security, but Alina, this is escalating. I think you should consider getting a restraining order. Against my stepson? The idea seemed absurd despite everything. Yes, he's shown he's willing to take what isn't legally his. The main property is registered in your name, but there's nothing physically stopping him from showing up there. After hanging up, I double-checked that all the doors and windows were locked. For the first time, I felt truly alone in the cottage, vulnerable in a way I never had before. I thought about what Jessica had said about dangerous people and wondered if I should be more afraid for Tyler than of him. The next morning, a certified letter arrived from Tyler's attorney, formally contesting Harold's trust and demanding a full accounting of all assets transferred to me in the 3 years prior to Harold's death. The language was cold and accusatory, implying I had manipulated a dying man into disinheriting his only son. I called Benjamin immediately. I expected this, he said after I read him the letter. It's a fishing expedition. They're hoping to find some technical error in the trust documents. Will they? No. But Alina, there's something else you should know. The audit results came back yesterday. Tyler has embezzled nearly $500,000 from the company over the past 5 years. I sank into a chair, stunned despite the journal entries that had prepared me for this possibility. What happens now? That's partially up to you, Benjamin said. As Harold's widow and the main beneficiary of his estate, you have some say in how this is handled. We could pursue criminal charges or we could handle it privately, requiring restitution. I thought of Jessica and her children, of the dangerous people Tyler apparently owed money to. I thought of Harold, who had loved his son despite everything. I need time to think, I told Benjamin. But please secure the books and anything else Tyler might try to take. I don't trust him right now. Already done, Benjamin assured me. And Alina, consider what I said about the restraining order. Tyler's desperate and desperate people do desperate things. I didn't file for a restraining order. Perhaps it was foolish, but some lingering sense of family obligation held me back. Tyler was still Harold's son, regardless of what he'd done. Instead, I spent the next week settling into the main cottage, reading through the remaining journals and beginning to process not just my grief for Harold, but the betrayal of discovering how much he had hidden from me. The coastal town was quiet in the off-season. I walked the empty beaches each morning, watching the waves crash against the rocky shore, feeling both anchorless and oddly free. Without a house to maintain or a husband to care for, my time was entirely my own for the first time in decades. On the 8th day, I ventured into the small shed behind the cottage that Harold had converted into a pottery studio for me years ago. It was dusty and neglected. We had only visited the cottage a few times in recent years as Harold's health declined, but all my equipment was still there, covered with drop cloths. I uncovered the wheel and ran my hands over its familiar surface. How long had it been since I'd created anything? 15 years? 20? I taught community classes occasionally, but my own work had been set aside so gradually I hardly noticed its absence. Harold had encouraged me to continue, but there was always something more pressing: his business, household responsibilities, Tyler's endless crises. I spent that day cleaning the studio, washing tools that had gathered dust, checking supplies that had dried out or deteriorated with time. By sunset, the space was ready, but something in me wasn't. I closed the door without throwing a single pot. That night my phone rang just as I was preparing for bed. Alina, it's Benjamin. I'm sorry to call so late, but there's a situation. The tension in his voice immediately set me on edge. What's happened? Tyler showed up at my office this afternoon demanding to know where you are. When I refused to tell him, he became threatening. Security had to escort him out. My mouth went dry. Did he hurt anyone? No, but he's clearly unraveling. The embezzlement investigation is proceeding, and the police now have enough evidence to press charges if we choose that route. Has he been drinking? I asked, remembering how Tyler's worst behavior always emerged with alcohol. I believe so. Alina, I really think you should reconsider that restraining order, and perhaps alert the local police that Tyler might appear at the cottage. I promised to think about it and hung up, suddenly aware of how isolated the cottage was, a quarter mile from the nearest neighbor. I double-checked the locks again before going to bed, but sleep eluded me. Around 2 in the morning I heard it, the crunch of tires on gravel. I sat bolt upright, heart pounding. No one but Benjamin knew I was here. I slipped out of bed and crept to the window, carefully peering past the edge of the curtain. A car I didn't recognize had pulled into my driveway, its headlights illuminating the front of the cottage before going dark. As I watched, the driver's door opened and Tyler stepped out. Even from a distance, I could see he was unsteady on his feet. He stumbled toward the house, face turned up toward the bedroom windows. I backed away, fumbling for my phone on the nightstand. Should I call the police? Benjamin. Before I could decide, I heard the rattle of the front door handle, followed by a loud pounding. "I know you're in there," Tyler shouted, his words slurred. "Open the door, Alina, we need to talk." I crept down the stairs, phone clutched in my hand but not yet dialing. Through the peephole, I could see Tyler leaning against the door frame, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled, tie loosened, hair uncombed. "What do you want, Tyler?" I called through the door. "There you are," he said with a bitter laugh. "Hiding out in Dad's love nest. It's my house legally and rightfully," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You need to leave." "I need what's mine," he shouted, pounding the door again. "That old fool might have let you trick him, but I'm not so easily fooled. Open this door or I'll break it down." I dialed 911, keeping my voice low as I gave the dispatcher the address and situation. They promised to send a patrol car, but warned it might take 15 minutes given our remote location. Tyler continued shouting, his words becoming increasingly incoherent as he alternated between threats and self-pity. At one point I heard glass shatter the small window beside the door. "I'm coming in," he called, his voice now terrifyingly close. Last chance to do this the easy way. I retreated to the kitchen, grabbing a heavy cast iron skillet from the stove. The thought of having to defend myself against my stepson was surreal. Yet here I was, 65 years old and trembling with a makeshift weapon, listening to him fumble with the broken window. When Tyler finally stumbled through the front door, I was standing in the living room, skillet raised defensively, phone still connected to the emergency dispatcher. "There you are," he slurred, blood dripping from a cut on his hand where he'd broken the window. "The grieving widow. Did you cry for him, Alina? Did you cry while you were stealing my inheritance?" "Tyler, you're drunk and trespassing," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "The police are on their way, leave now and we can talk when you're sober." He laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the quiet house. "Always so reasonable, so perfect. No wonder Dad fell for your act, poor lonely widow needs taking care of. Well, guess what? The money's gone, all of it. I need what's mine." "The money you stole from your father's company, you mean? The $500,000 you embezzled." Tyler's face contorted with rage. "He owed me that money. I worked for that company my entire life while he doted on you." "You were paid a generous salary," I countered. "Harold gave you everything, Tyler, everything except the right to steal from him." He lunged toward me suddenly and I raised the skillet higher, backing away. "Stay back, I don't want to hurt you. You've done nothing but hurt me since you wormed your way into Dad's life," he spat. "First you took my father, then my inheritance. What else do you want from me?" "I never took anything from you, Tyler," I said, a lifetime of suppressed frustration finally boiling over. "I tried to love you, I tried to be there for you, you rejected every overture I ever made." "Liar," he hissed, advancing again. I retreated until my back hit the wall. "I know about the gambling, Tyler. Jessica told me. Is that where the embezzled money went? Is that why you're so desperate?" At the mention of his wife's name, something shifted in Tyler's expression. "Jessica called you when?" "A few days ago. She's worried about you, about those dangerous people you owe money to." Tyler's face crumpled, the rage suddenly replaced by something that looked almost like shame. "She wasn't supposed to know about that. I kept it from her." "She knows, Tyler, and she's scared. Your children are scared." He sank onto the sofa, head in his hands. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. I just needed enough to cover the debts, then I was going to pay it all back. Dad wasn't supposed to find out. No one was." We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound Tyler's ragged breathing and the distant wail of approaching sirens. Harold knew, I said finally. He'd started an audit before he died. He knew you were taking money from the company. Tyler looked up, his face pale. He knew, and he didn't confront me. He was trying to figure out how to handle it when his heart gave out. I set down the skillet, suddenly exhausted. He loved you, Tyler, despite everything. The sirens grew louder and Tyler glanced toward the broken door. They'll arrest me. Yes, I said, for breaking and entering at the very least. He looked at me, his eyes bloodshot but suddenly clear. And the embezzlement, will you press charges for that too? The question hung between us as red and blue lights began to flash across the walls of the cottage. In that moment, looking at Tyler, Harold's son, my stepson, this broken man who had caused so much pain, I didn't know what I would do. Part of me wanted him to face consequences for his actions, for the years of cruelty and the violation of his father's trust. Another part remembered the teenage boy I had tried so hard to connect with, the child Harold had loved unconditionally. That depends, I said finally, on what happens next. The police arrived moments later, taking in the broken door, Tyler's bloodied hand, and my shaken appearance. They handcuffed Tyler while he offered no resistance, his earlier fury replaced by a dull resignation. As they led him to the patrol car, he looked back at me standing in the doorway. "I'm sorry," he said, so quietly I almost missed it. "Not for everything, but for tonight, for this." It wasn't much, and it changed nothing about our circumstances, but it was perhaps the first genuine thing Tyler had said to me in 30 years. After the police left, having taken my statement and secured the broken door as best they could, I stood in the silent cottage, adrenaline slowly ebbing from my system. Dawn was breaking over the ocean, pale light filtering through the windows. I made my way to the kitchen, filled the kettle, and prepared a cup of tea with trembling hands. Then, instead of returning to bed, I walked out to the pottery studio behind the cottage. As the sun rose over the Atlantic, I uncovered my wheel, sat down, and centered a ball of clay for the first time in 20 years. 6 months passed with surprising swiftness. Tyler was released on bail the morning after breaking into the cottage, with strict orders to stay away from me. Benjamin handled most of the legal aftermath, allowing me to focus on rebuilding my life in Maine. The coastal community welcomed me warmly. My nearest neighbor, Iris, was a retired art teacher who had known Harold and me during our summer visits over the years. She helped me connect with local artists and gallery owners, introducing me as Alina the Potter rather than Harold's widow. My hands remembered what my mind had forgotten. After those first tentative attempts at the wheel, something unlocked inside me. I began creating again, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. My work had changed, becoming less technically perfect but more emotionally resonant. The pots and vessels that emerged from my hands now told stories of loss, resilience, and reinvention. Marta visited from Millfield, marveling at the transformation in both my living space and my spirit. "You seem different," she observed one evening as we sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Lighter somehow." "I am," I admitted. "I miss Harold terribly, but I'm discovering parts of myself that got lost along the way." "Does that make sense?" Marta nodded, understanding without judgment. She had been there through it all: my first marriage, Harold, the struggles with Tyler. She knew better than anyone how much of myself I had set aside to make those relationships work. With Benjamin's guidance, I made decisions about Harold's estate and company. The embezzlement investigation continued, but I had not yet decided whether to press criminal charges against Tyler. His wife Jessica had called several times, updating me on his progress in a gambling addiction program and family therapy. For the children's sake, I wanted to believe he could change. One morning in October, Benjamin called with unexpected news. "Alina, I've been approached by the Millfield Arts Council. They're planning a fundraiser for their new community arts center, and they're hoping you might consider exhibiting some of your work." "My pottery?" I asked, surprised. "I haven't shown anything publicly in decades." "Apparently word has spread about your recent pieces. A gallery owner in Portland mentioned your work to the council director." I don't know, Benjamin, I hesitated. I'm not sure I'm ready for that kind of attention. It would mean returning to Millfield, he acknowledged. But it might also be an opportunity to reclaim your identity there as Alina the artist, not just Harold's widow. After we hung up, I walked through my studio, examining the pieces I'd created over the past months. There were elegant vases with deliberately irregular rims, their glazes mimicking the ocean's shifting colors. A series of vessels inspired by Harold's books, each bearing text impressions from pages I'd loved. And most personally, a collection of small containers designed to hold precious things, memories, secrets, hopes, their exteriors rough but interiors smooth and gleaming. Perhaps it was time to share them. Not just the pottery, but the story they told about loss and renewal. I called Benjamin back and agreed to the exhibition. Returning to Millfield was harder than I had anticipated. As I drove past familiar streets and buildings, memories surfaced unbidden. Harold and I walking hand in hand through the park. The bookstore where he'd proposed. The house Tyler had taken, which I glimpsed from a distance, its new paint color a jarring reminder that it was no longer mine. I stayed with Marta rather than a hotel, drawing comfort from our decades of friendship. Benjamin arranged for the delivery and setup of my pottery pieces at the art center, handling all the details with characteristic efficiency. The night before the exhibition opening, I received an unexpected text message from Jessica. Tyler knows about your show tomorrow. He wants to come. I told him it's your decision. I sat holding my phone, unsure how to respond. Part of me feared another confrontation, another public scene, but another part recognized this might be an important moment for both of us. He can come, I texted back. But please make sure he understands this is my space, my event. Jessica's response came quickly. He understands. Thank you, Alina. The art center was transformed for the fundraiser, with my pottery displayed prominently in the main gallery. Small spotlights illuminated each piece, casting soft shadows against white pedestals. Beside them, discreet cards explained my inspiration and process, written with Benjamin's help. As guests began to arrive, I stood near the entrance, wearing a simple blue dress that Marta had insisted brought out my eyes. I greeted familiar faces from my previous life in Millfield, Harold's colleagues, neighbors, friends who had drifted away after Tyler's actions at the funeral. Many seemed surprised by my new role as featured artist, their congratulations tinged with curiosity about my transformation. Halfway through the evening, I saw them enter, Tyler and Jessica, dressed formally and moving hesitantly through the crowd. When Tyler spotted me, he froze momentarily, then straightened his shoulders and approached with Jessica at his side. Alina, he said formally. Thank you for allowing me to come. Tyler, I acknowledged with a nod. Jessica, I appreciate you both being here. Jessica squeezed her husband's arm encouragingly. Your work is beautiful, Alina, truly extraordinary. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched by her kindness. It's been a journey finding my way back to it. Tyler cleared his throat. I never knew you were so talented. Dad always said you were, but I never really paid attention. Before I could respond, Benjamin appeared at my elbow, his expression carefully neutral. Alina, the Arts Council director, would like to make some remarks. They're requesting your presence near your collection. I excused myself, feeling Tyler's eyes follow me as I moved through the crowd. The director's speech praised my work and its contribution to the fundraising effort, mentioning that several pieces had already sold. As applause filled the room, I caught sight of Tyler examining one of my vessels closely, his expression unreadable. Later, as the event was winding down, Tyler approached me again, this time alone. I need to talk to you, he said quietly. Not here, perhaps tomorrow if you're willing. I studied his face, noting the changes since our last encounter. The haunted look in his eyes had faded somewhat, replaced by something that might have been humility. About what, Tyler? About the company, about Dad's journals, about everything. He hesitated. Benjamin told me you haven't decided whether to press criminal charges for the embezzlement. So that was it. He wanted to plead his case. Tomorrow then, I agreed. Marta's house, 10 o'clock. Benjamin should be present. Tyler nodded. Of course. The following morning, I prepared for Tyler's visit with unexpected calm. Whatever happened, I was no longer the defenseless widow he had thrown out on the day of Harold's funeral. I had found my strength again in my art, in the truth of Harold's journals, in the community that had embraced me. Tyler arrived precisely at 10, alone but carrying a large envelope. Benjamin arrived moments later, his briefcase in hand. We gathered in Marta's sunny kitchen, the tension palpable as coffee was poured and preliminary pleasantries exchanged. Finally, Tyler placed the envelope on the table and slid it toward me. "Before we discuss anything else, I want you to have these," he said. "They're the original deed to the Millfield house and the transfer documents. I'm signing it back to you." I stared at him in disbelief. "Why would you do that?" "Because it was never mine to take," Tyler said, meeting my eyes directly for perhaps the first time in our long, difficult relationship. "Dad loved that house because he shared it with you. I took it because I was angry and desperate. I want to make that right at least." Benjamin reached for the documents, examining them with professional scrutiny. "These appear to be in order, though I'll need to verify everything." I sat back in my chair, studying the man across from me, Harold's son, my adversary for 30 years, now offering a gesture I never expected. "The house doesn't matter, Tyler," I said finally. "I've made a new home in Maine. What matters is what you took from your father, his trust, his peace of mind in his final years." Tyler flinched but didn't look away. "I know, I've been reading his journals too." Benjamin gave me copies of the sections about me. He paused, visibly struggling with emotion. I never knew how much he saw, how much he understood about what I was doing. "Harold was more perceptive than either of us gave him credit for," I said softly. "He loved you," Tyler said, the words clearly difficult for him. "Really loved you. I see that now in his writing, even though I fought against seeing it for years." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 3 decades of misunderstanding hanging between us. "I won't press charges for the embezzlement," I said finally. "On 2 conditions." Tyler leaned forward. "Name them." "First, you continue with your recovery program and therapy. Jessica says it's helping, and your children deserve a father who's present and responsible." He nodded. "And the second condition," I took a deep breath. "You repay the money not to me but to the company pension fund for the employees who have served faithfully all these years. Every penny with interest." Tyler closed his eyes briefly, relief and resignation mingling in his expression. "It will take time. I've sold nearly everything, but it won't cover the full amount." "Benjamin will work out a payment plan," I said, glancing at the attorney who nodded confirmation. "And in the meantime, you'll work for the company at a reduced salary, rebuilding what you've damaged." It wasn't perfect justice. Part of me still wanted Tyler to face more severe consequences for his actions. But looking at him across the table, Harold's son, flawed and human, I recognized that this path offered something beyond mere punishment. It offered the possibility of redemption not just for Tyler, but for all of us who had been caught in this painful web of family dysfunction. 1 year after Harold's death, I stood on the deck of the Maine cottage, watching the sun rise over the Atlantic. The morning air was crisp, carrying the promise of autumn and the scent of pine and salt. So much had changed in 12 months, both around me and within me. My pottery studio had flourished beyond anything I could have imagined. What began as personal therapy had evolved into a genuine second career at 66. My exhibition at the Millfield Art Center had led to interest from galleries in Portland and Boston. My hands, once soft from years of domestic life, were now strong and calloused from working clay, reclaiming a part of myself I had nearly forgotten. Harold's foundation had become a reality too. With Benjamin's guidance, I had established the Harold Winters Foundation for Literary and Visual Arts, using a portion of the trust to fund scholarships for mature artists and writers beginning second careers. The foundation also supported community arts programs in Millfield, creating the kind of legacy Harold would have cherished. I had decided not to reclaim the Millfield house, despite Tyler's offer to return it. That chapter of my life was closed. Instead, I sold it, adding the proceeds to the foundation endowment. The main cottage, once our seasonal escape, had become my true home, its weathered shingles and blue shutters a daily reminder of what Harold and I had shared. I heard car tires on the gravel driveway and turned to see Benjamin's sedan pulling up. Today was the anniversary gathering I had planned, a small memorial not for Harold's death but for his life. A celebration of who he had been and what he had built, both in his business and his relationships. "Good morning," Benjamin called, emerging from his car with a bouquet of autumn flowers. "Perfect day for this." "It is," I agreed, accepting the flowers with a smile. Harold would have loved it. Within the hour, more cars arrived. Marta, my steadfast friend, several of Harold's oldest colleagues from the publishing company, two young writers whose careers he had launched. Iris from down the road, who had become my closest friend in Maine. And finally, Tyler, Jessica, and their children. Watching Tyler step cautiously from his modest car, I noted how different he looked from the arrogant man who had evicted me a year ago. The expensive suits were gone, replaced by casual clothes. The perpetual expression of entitlement had softened into something more thoughtful. Our relationship remained complex and sometimes strained, but we had established a cautious peace built on clearer boundaries and mutual respect. I greeted everyone on the porch, then led them through the cottage to the back garden where tables had been set up overlooking the ocean. A local caterer was arranging platters of food, and Harold's favorite jazz played softly from hidden speakers. "Before we begin," I said once everyone was seated, "I want to thank you all for coming today. This isn't a day for mourning, but for remembering Harold as he truly was, brilliant, kind, complicated, and very human." I had placed framed photos of Harold around the garden, Harold laughing at a book launch, Harold sailing on this very coastline, Harold and me on our wedding day. Not idealized images, but real moments that captured his essence. "Each of you knew a different facet of Harold," I continued. "Today, I hope we can share those memories and celebrate the man who connected all our lives." The afternoon unfolded with food, wine, and stories. Harold's colleagues recalled his integrity and innovation in publishing. The young writers spoke of his mentorship and belief in their work. Marta shared funny anecdotes from our early days together that made everyone laugh. When it was Tyler's turn to speak, a hush fell over the gathering. He stood awkwardly, wine glass in hand, looking less like the successful executive he had once portrayed himself to be and more like a man still finding his footing. "My father and I had a complicated relationship," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion visible on his face. "For too long, I saw only what he couldn't give me, not what he did give me. It took losing him, and nearly losing everything else, to understand what he tried to teach me about integrity, responsibility, and love." Tyler glanced at me before continuing. "He chose Alina to share his life, and it was the wisest choice he ever made. It took me 30 years and a dozen mistakes to see that, but I see it now." I felt tears well in my eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. This was supposed to be a celebration, not another moment of grief. Yet Tyler's words had touched something still tender within me. Later, as guests mingled in the garden, I slipped away to my studio for a moment of quiet. Among my recent work stood a special piece I had created for today, a large vessel glazed in Harold's favorite shade of blue, its surface etched with words from his journals. Not the painful entries about Tyler, but the joyful ones about our life together, his hopes for the future, his reflections on love and purpose. Tyler found me there, standing in the doorway hesitantly. "May I come in?" he asked. I nodded, and he entered, looking around at the transformed space at the evidence of my renewed creativity. "Dad would be proud of what you've done here," he said quietly. "I hope so," I replied. "I hope he would be proud of both of us." Tyler approached the blue vessel, reading the etched words with visible emotion. "I never really knew him, did I? Not the way you did." "We knew different versions of him," I said. "But he loved both those versions, Tyler. He loved you even when you made it difficult." Tyler smiled faintly. "Like father, like son, I'm working on making it less difficult for the people in my life now." It was true. Over the past year, Tyler had adhered to our agreement with surprising dedication. He worked at a reduced salary at the company, making regular payments toward the embezzled funds. He attended therapy and recovery meetings. He was rebuilding his relationship with Jessica and their children with a humility I had never seen in him before. "How's the payment plan going?" I asked, though Benjamin kept me updated. "Slow but steady," Tyler said. "Another 4 years at this rate, but worth it." We stood in companionable silence for a moment, an unprecedented peace between us. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you," Tyler said eventually. "The journals Dad kept, do you ever think about publishing them?" The question surprised me. Some parts perhaps, the literary reflections, his thoughts on books and writing, but the personal entries, especially about you and me, those feel private. Tyler nodded. "I agree, though sometimes I think his insights about family, about fathers and sons and forgiveness might help other people." He paused. "But that's your decision, they're yours now." "They're ours," I corrected gently. "Your father's legacy belongs to both of us in different ways." As we walked back to the gathering together, I felt a sense of closure that had eluded me since Harold's death. Not because the pain of losing him had disappeared, it hadn't, and perhaps never would completely, but because I had found a way forward that honored what he had given me while embracing what I could create for myself. The foundation would support new artists finding their voice. The journals would preserve Harold's wisdom and insight. And I would continue creating pottery that told stories of love, loss, resilience, and renewal. My own story, shaped by hands that had finally remembered their purpose. Later that evening, after all the guests had departed, I sat alone on the porch with a glass of Harold's favorite scotch. The sun was setting over the water, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. In my hand was the last journal Harold had kept, open to an entry from just weeks before his death. "Watched Alina on the beach today, collecting shells at sunrise. 30 years together and still the sight of her moves me. I worry about what will happen when I'm gone. Not about money or property, Benjamin has helped me secure those things, but about her spirit, her art, her sense of self beyond being my wife. She has given so much to me and to Tyler over the years. My greatest hope is that when I'm no longer here, she'll reclaim all the parts of herself she set aside. That she'll throw pots again, exhibit her work, live by the ocean as she always wanted. That she'll be a leaner first, not just Harold's widow. I've tried to make that possible. I hope it will be enough." I closed the journal and looked out at the darkening ocean. "It was enough, Harold," I whispered. "More than enough." I thought about the exhibition pieces still to finish for the Portland Gallery, the foundation scholarship recipients to select, the community classes I had agreed to teach in town next month. I thought about the painful journey of the past year, from the widow kicked out at her husband's funeral to the artist reclaiming her voice. I thought about Tyler, still flawed but finally growing into the man his father had hoped he could be. None of it was perfect. Life rarely is. But as I sat there in the gathering darkness, listening to the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore, I felt something that had eluded me since the moment the paramedics had taken Harold away. A sense of possibility, of future, of peace. Tomorrow I would wake early and walk the beach at sunrise. I would collect shells and see glass, finding inspiration in their shapes and textures. I would return to my studio and continue the work of creation, of transformation, of making beauty from brokenness. The cottage would fill with the scent of coffee and the sound of the radio. Life would go on, different but no less meaningful. And Harold would be there, not physically but in the foundation bearing his name, in the journals preserving his thoughts, in the trust that had given me freedom, and most of all, in the love that had shaped 30 years of my life and continued to shape whatever years remained. The fortune he left me wasn't just financial security or property. It was the chance to discover who I could still become, even after devastating loss. It was the gift of a future I hadn't imagined possible on that terrible day when Tyler had forced me from our home. As darkness fell completely, I rose from my chair and went inside, leaving the porch light on out of habit. Tomorrow would bring new clay to shape, new challenges to face, new moments of both grief and joy. I was ready for all of it.